So good evening, everyone who I haven't had a chance to already speak with. My name is Amanda Najim Williams, and I'm the Director of Racial and Social Justice for the City of Somerville. Thank you all for being here as we continue to celebrate Black History Month and community together. We hope to see you joining us for the remaining events planned this month. A thank you to Tufts University and the NAACP Mystic Valley branch for their yes and partnership to bring this event to you all this evening. And a special thank you to our panelists, Congresswoman Pressley, Courtney Henderson, and Michael Curry for their yes and willingness to share their insights with us on this panel. The mission of the Department of Racial and Social Justice is to lead equity efforts in the city of Somerville, to collaborate with departments, constituents, stakeholders, to eliminate institutional and structural systems that create racial inequities, social disparities, and injustices. That mission is directly connected to why we are here this evening. History shows that progress begins when individuals and communities speak honestly about inequity, when we tell the truth about systems, policies, and practices that have created disparities and harmed communities. But naming injustice is only the first step. The next step, and the harder one, is active participation. It requires us to mobilize, to organize, to examine our own roles within systems, and to commit to ensuring that past harms are not repeated. It calls us to move from awareness to action. And this is why gatherings like this matter. By choosing to be in this room, to listen, to reflect, to engage in dialogue, we are making our department's mission actionable. Our presence here signals a shared willingness to confront difficult truths, to learn from history, and to collectively shape a more equitable path forward. This is what it looks like to turn values into practice and reflection into responsibility. Black History Month is not meant to be honored only in a single month. Black History Month calls us to take a collective and conscious pause to reflect, to learn, and to be in community with one another. It is a time when we intentionally gather to acknowledge resilience, brilliance, and the contributions of Black communities, and to recommit ourselves to the work that continues beyond these 28 days. I invite each of you to actively honor Black history 365 days a year, and I invite you to do that in the following 3 ways. It means continuing to stand up for civil rights, social justice, and equity in your everyday actions, words, and decisions. It means preserving, honoring, and learning from history so that we move forward together as a community. It means recognizing that each and every one of us holds the power to create positive change right where we are today. And my hope for all of you is that it also looks like staying engaged with the work of this department. As we think ahead in our collective roles to practice equity in action, I also want to take a moment to share that on Monday, I will be transitioning to the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs from the City of Somerville. For the past 4 years, I have had the honor of serving this city through the Department of Racial and Social Justice, and I'm incredibly proud of the work that we have built together. The partnerships we've strengthened, the systems we've challenged, the foundations we've laid, and for the many firsts that we've navigated together. While it is a change, I am encouraged by the attendance here today, especially those familiar faces who have been with us over the years, the work of the RSJ team, and the plans that I know that are in the pipeline. It has truly been an honor to serve in this role, and I'm excited for what lies ahead for all of us together. I thank you for being a part of my journey as the Director of Racial and Social Justice, and I hope today serves as a building block for continued collaboration and partnership with the department, and a reminder that while I am moving houses, I am still in the neighborhood. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Dean Dana Cunningham of Tisch College of Civic Life of Tufts University. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. It is wonderful to see all of you here tonight. I just want to say that Tisch College is a unique higher educational institution. We are committed to cultivating generations of civic leaders. That is what we do all day long. We teach, we research, and we work with our neighbors in communities to support better outcomes for communities. And so it is such an honor to have this panel here tonight, especially Congresswoman Pressley, my personal shero, I must say. Just an extraordinary hero and fighter for racial justice in times that could not be more fraught and complicated. So it is a tremendous honor to have you and to have the panel here. So welcome to Tufts. We're in for a wonderful night. Thank you all for being here.
All right, good evening, everyone. So again, I just want to start by thanking our partner, Tufts University, and for hosting us here and supporting the program, and the City of Somerville's Department of Racial and Social Justice for the invitation to collaborate on this program. My name is Jillian Harvey. I am the president of the Mystic Valley Area NAACP, and that is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which just last week celebrated its 117th year of existence. The NAACP's mandate is to establish and maintain equal access to the judicial system, proper health care, educational opportunities, economic development, youth empowerment, and voting rights in all of our communities. The Mystic Valley branch was established in 1977, and I've proudly been serving the towns and cities of Malden, Medford, Everett, Arlington, Woburn, Winchester, and more since 2022. Wow, yeah, it's been a while. This year marks the 100th anniversary of celebrating and recognizing the contributions, history, and experiences of Black people. And today we're celebrating Black History Month by taking a look into the past and exploring the resilience of Black people and the fight for freedom and civil rights. History repeats itself again and again and again. And it's time that we start to use what we know and tap into the lessons we've learned over time. So the NAACP was established over a century ago to fight for civil rights, challenge discrimination, and pave the way for true freedom, access, and opportunity for Black people, but for all people. And yet here in 2026, we are witnessing so many individuals' rights being infringed upon, and human dignity is being discarded regularly. I know I'm tired, I know some of y'all are tired, but we can't let that stop us. We cannot give up. We cannot stay quiet, and we must resist. And in order to do so, we need to look across generations for inspiration and insight. We need the wisdom from our elders, and we need the hope and creativity and vision of the future of our youth. With that said, I'm very excited for the upcoming conversation that I know will energize us and provide us with plenty of little droplets of knowledge that we can take and apply to all of the challenges that we're facing now. And so I'd like to introduce Catherine Nakato. Nope. She will pronounce her name. I have been practicing for like the last hour. Who is the Deputy Director of the City of Somerville's Racial and Social Justice Department. And Catherine will be moderating this wonderful panel tonight. And I'm going to have her introduce our panelists. So come on up here.
If you hear my voice, clap once. If you hear my voice, clap twice. I'm just making sure y'all are engaged because we're about to go in an amazing conversation and I need y'all present, okay? My name is Catherine Nakato and I am honored to stand before you all today as the Deputy Director of the Racial and Social Justice Department. We're gonna get right into these panels getting on this stage, and so I'm gonna give you all a brief bio of each, beginning with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who is the U.S. representative of Massachusetts' 7th Congressional District and the first woman of color elected to Congress from the Commonwealth. A lifelong activist and legislator, she champions reproductive justice, immigrant rights, workers' rights, and equity for marginalized communities. She serves on the House Committee on Financial Services and the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, and previously made history as the first woman of color elected to the Boston City Council. Ladies and gentlemen, Ayanna Pressley. Up next, we have Michael Curry, Esquire, who is the president and CEO of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers, representing 50 health centers serving more than 1 million patients statewide. A longtime civil rights and health equity leader with over 35 years of experience. He previously served as the president of the NAACP Boston branch and is a national board member of the NAACP. During COVID-19, he co-chaired the Massachusetts Senate's Health Equity Task Force and co-founded the Health Equity Compact to advance reform. Dr. Curry is also an attorney, adjunct professor, and nationally recognized speaker on racial equity and public policy. Give a round of applause for Dr. Curry. Up next, we have Courtney Henderson, who is a Massachusetts-based political strategist, civic leader, and educator focused on voter engagement, equity, and community empowerment. She previously served as the City of Brockton's first Director of Immigrant Affairs and now serves as co-president of the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts. Courtney is also an adjunct professor, nonprofit leader, and founder of Develop and Empower Consulting LLC with more than a decade of experience in political strategy and public policy. Give a round of applause for Courtney Henderson. Y'all ready? Let's go. All right. I know you all have their bios in front of you with the programs, and so it's clear the impactful work you all are doing. But my first question is, what got you into the work you're currently doing, and what keeps you doing it?
All right, mic check, mic check. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. First and foremost, I just want to thank everyone for being here because you could have been anywhere else tonight but here. So I so appreciate and want to celebrate the intention with which you arrive at this convening. And the fact that we are in this moment celebrating Black scholarship and academia and intellectual thoughts, and that we are convening is in and of itself a radical act. And so, as I was saying when I was with my good sister Crystal recently, I keep revisiting that urgent question from Dr. King, where do we go from here, chaos or community? And in a moment of cruelty and chaos and corruption, we have to keep choosing community. So I thank you for doing that. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with all of our partners today. Obviously the NAACP, Mystic Valley Branch, Tufts University, thank you, Dean, for your kind words, and the Department of Racial and Social Justice, and to be here with this esteemed panel. Okay, my origin story, I'll give it as succinctly as I can. I get it honest. My mother, I do believe our parents are our first teachers, and I had two extraordinary teachers in my parents, not only for what they instilled in me, but I was proximate to the impact of policy violence and systemic neglect in their lives. My father is a survivor of mass incarceration. He was incarcerated for some 14 years because his drug addiction was criminalized, but he was always brilliant. And while he was incarcerated, because of policies like Pell Grants, which I support, Second Chance Pell Grants, he attained 2 advanced degrees while incarcerated, came out, earned his PhD, became a dean of a college, a professor of journalism, and a published author. But the best part of that story that the media will not tell you, which is why I'm telling the whole story here, is just that our bond today, after many years of calling him by his first name and not Dad,
Today, I do call him Dad. We are an incredible example of redemption and grace and mercy and healing. And 11 years ago, he walked me down the aisle to the love of my life. So that's what I really want to celebrate. My mother, who was a super voter, a proud Democrat, attendance rights activist, she held many jobs. But what I focused on was the work that she did, which is often different from your job. The work of community upliftment and betterment. She showed me the power of the ballot, the power of movements. She didn't read me stories about princes coming to save me. She read me the speeches of Barbara Jordan and Shirley Chisholm. So when I say I get it honest, my first coloring books were produced by the Chicago Defender, where I was coloring it, afros of children with fists raised saying nation time. So I really do get it honest in that way. But as I close, I want to say the other education that I received from my mother as a teacher were the indignities and the injustices that she navigated as a Black woman. Because my mother raised me alone, I saw her humanity early on. A lot of children have to grow up before they see their mother as a woman. But I knew my mother as a woman. I was there to nurse her through heartaches and hardships, and she would come home and tell me about the white men that she trained that were promoted and paid more that were promoted over her and paid more than her. I knew I was a latchkey kid home at 5 years old because she couldn't afford childcare. I knew that there was a healthcare system that was gaslighting her uterine fibroids and her other pain and delegitimizing it. And I knew that she one day went to work when she wasn't fully healed and collapsed on the street because she didn't have paid leave. And so my mother was an incredible teacher, not only for her righteous role modeling, but for the ways in which I saw policy violence and, again, systemic harm show up in her life. And that has shaped and formed me in formidable ways, and that's what keeps me doing the work. That's what compels me, that's what motivates me, and it's what holds me accountable. Thank you.
So many things that I want to say, and what's rushing through my head. One is, first and foremost, thank you for having me tonight. My heart is heavy tonight for two reasons. One, of course, the loss of Jesse Jackson. I've been on the national board since 2014. I've been on the executive committee most of that time for the National NAACP. The only person to serve from New England since the 1970s when Vernon Sport, Tuskegee Airmen, represented New England on the national board.
Mercy.
And I don't even say it for the clap. I say it because that has put me in the rooms with people that I read about, that we talk about, that I've had a chance to sit next to Julian Bond for hours to talk about the history of the movement and Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I've been in a room to engage with Jesse Jackson. And my heart is heavy because we're losing them. And I don't feel like many of us got the lesson that they left for us. So my heart is heavy both for his loss and that I'm concerned that we're not telling his story and their story. When I had a chance to speak on a Black History Month panel last night about slavery, and I do extensive research on the history of anti-Black racism in this country. I present last week in the UK, virtually. I wish they had brought me there in person, but they did on virtually. But I presented, and when I started those presentations, one of the things I say to them, to your question, is that I grew up in Lenox Street housing projects, right? I was a child whose mother moved here for the warmth of other sons, left Tuscaloosa, Greensboro, moved here, left her kids in Alabama, moved here for housekeeping work, like so many Black mothers did during that time, worked for a wealthy family in Chestnut Hill, eventually had me at Boston City Hospital. And when I tell people why I do what I do, I tell them that when I walked around my house, we all had asthma. When I walked outside, most of the kids in my neighborhood had asthma. We had incinerators in the hallway. We had roaches and rats in our apartments. All my uncles were incarcerated, mostly for nonviolent drug offenses. So I spent my childhood going to Norfolk State Prison, Walpole, literally sitting in the lobby or walking under that big walkway with the gentleman with the rifle aimed at you as you walk through. Many of us could not go downtown to shop because you got followed, Filene's, Macy's. We went to crappy schools. quite frankly. And I don't say crappy schools because the teachers didn't want to be there. Crappy schools didn't have the resources, quite frankly, had violence that didn't allow us to learn. And all these things I saw, the health disparities, the economic disparities, the housing disparities, the poverty, then I went and visited my family in Rochester, and they lived the same way. Then I visited my family in the Bronx, 184th Street in Webster. Lived worse than we lived in Boston. Then I went to Youngstown, Ohio. Then I got to college and visited people in North Minneapolis. At some point when you're a child and you're an African American and you see all of this without context, you say something's wrong with us. Because we're not in the C-suites, we're not in the medical schools, we're sicker, we're dying, our black women are dying in pregnancy. You can't understand all of that as a child. And it wasn't until I landed on a college campus in Minnesota, leaving Roxbury, went to McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota, and met the most amazing man. And the reason why I'm holding up my phone is he just called me right before I walked in. Professor Mahmoud El-Khadi, for anybody from Boston, he was the Mel King of Minneapolis, St. Paul. If you were an activist on the ground in Minneapolis, St. Paul, all those folks you see on TV, they'll tell you the history of Mahmoud El-Khadi. Most of them have been trained by Mahmoud, and he was my Black Studies professor. So I do this because of everything I saw growing up. He gave me the context to understand why we're here, what made us poor, what made us sick, what barred us from those opportunities, and I came back with the mission of changing that. Hence why everything from being an organizer around the Million Man March in 1995, standing out there with 1 million brothers and coming back and trying to organize, to my work with the NAACP. I feel like I'm here for that reason, and that's my answer.
Thank you. I too also want to thank everyone for being here and for the warm invitation to be on this panel. It is truly amazing to sit on a panel with extraordinary people, and sometimes my imposter syndrome kicks in because I don't feel like I'm supposed to be up here. But to answer your question, like Congresswoman Pressley mentioned, it started at home for me in getting started. My parents were very active parents with me. They're actually watching from Ohio, where I'm originally from. And they had us involved. We volunteered very early on. By the time we hit high school, we had to pick a volunteer organization that we would have to go to after school. We would watch the news every day. That's what we want. If we wanted to watch TV during the week, during the school week, it couldn't be anything but the news. And that was to get us involved in what's happening locally and what's happening around the world around us, because we don't want to be so confined to just our community that we forget what's happening outside of that. And so in addition to that, my parents were really big and active in getting us involved in HBCUs as it came time to go to college. And so I'm a proud graduate of Fisk University, which is an HBCU based in Nashville, Tennessee. And it's the alma mater of great people like John Lewis, W.E.B. Du Bois, Diane Nash, and Ida B. Wells, who is my personal favorite. And so being at a HBCU taught us a lot of things, but one of the things that really stuck to me as a freshman in college was The Talented 10th, which was written by W.E.B. Du Bois. And that was that 10% of the people will go on to be successful and be educated and have opportunities that most people will not. But it is our responsibility as the 10% to go back and pull up the 90% behind us. And as a young freshman, maybe even a little ignorant, I didn't agree with that. I didn't think that me being in a classroom, studying, working hard, doing late nights, and I had to pull up the 90%. But that changed very, very quickly. By the time I graduated Fisk University, I understood the importance of what WB had said, and that I am privileged, and that I did have an opportunity that most people will probably never have. And so I'm going to take that knowledge, and I'm going to go back to my community and go back from where I started and make sure that that ladder that was left down for me is going to stay down for the people behind me. Yes. And so that's why I got involved in several different organizations. I sit on several boards now. But one of the main things that I would love to do is pour back into the community and do the panels, but also do the grassroots work, because that's where it really happens. I can sit and do panels all day long, but there needs to be people that are going to help mobilize the community. And so it all started really from home, but it really firmed up in my time at Fisk University, and it hasn't done anything but blossom and grow ever since then.
Thank you all. And Courtney, to your point, your bio's in our program. You could have your bio just be your first and last name, and you still belong here.
Thank you. I
And you
appreciate
belong
that.
on this panel of this one. I want to make sure you know that for sure. Now, many people think the fight for civil rights as history, but each of you work in spaces where it's very present. Thinking about now, modern day, what does protecting and fighting for civil rights look like in your daily work?
I'm going to actually throw this to Michael and let him start and be the pace setter here. I also want to just, Courtney, I'm pleased to meet you. And I want to thank you for inviting Michael, because it's the only way I get to see my brother socially is on panels. So thank you that I get to get some time with him. And I told him when I was coming in and he was on the phone, I said, whatever you say, I was going to say cosign. This brother is so tough right here. He is so brilliant. And I'm so grateful for the historic contextualizing that he brings to every presentation. So I'm going to follow him.
Put the pressure on me, boy. You know, it's funny, being a student of history and having, as I mentioned, Professor El-Kati, literally, I used to say when I was a student on that campus that I was poor. I was a kid from the project, so we didn't travel anywhere. We didn't travel anywhere you couldn't drive. And when I sat in his class, I literally traveled the world. I literally traveled time. I was on the bridge in Selma. I was one of those kids marching in 1963 to downtown Birmingham. He literally took us there in that class. And I say that to say this, that when I do this work now, I chair advocacy and policy for the entire NAACP National. That means any policy issue you know comes out of the National NAACP comes to the committee I chair. So around that table is housing, environmental justice, education, healthcare, international affairs. They bring policy issues to the committee, we deliberate, and then we bring it to the full board if we agree. There's an analogy I make to the movie Sixth Sense, if people remember the movie. And the classic line from that movie is, "I see dead people." Anyone ever see that movie? First of all, if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it, because it's one of the classic movies of all time. Bruce Willis. And the reason why I use that movie as an analogy is, in that movie, the little boy could see dead people. And he didn't want to see them, right? In fact, seeing them made him crazy. They wanted him to say bye to a loved one, to solve their murder, and he wanted to just cover up his head and pretend he didn't see him, because seeing him made them crazy. And I say that's the work of civil rights. That's the work of fighting against racism. Because seeing it means you might not get invited to the next meeting, it means you may lose your job, it means that people typecast you as being militant. It means that colleague you have, potentially white or even a person of color, may not want to be in your presence anymore because you're speaking truth. That's the real work of civil rights. So when you're challenging and you say, why is it that Black women are dying at higher rates in their pregnancy? There are some who believe that they're dying of higher rates because it's their fault. When I can tell you that Black and brown folks are dying at higher rates of diabetes, you say, well, that must be because they're not eating right. Or so many of our children are failing out of school or not achieving at their highest potential. That must be because they didn't study well hard enough, or their parents aren't supporting them. We have these narratives in society, hence back to my point about context. We need civil rights work. And we need people to get, first of all, I tell people, Charles Hamilton Houston said in 1935, he won a case with a young man who was applying to the University of Maryland, wanted to go to law school, couldn't get into University of Maryland, and he won in the lower courts, he won in the Circuit Court of Appeals, and it was going to the Supreme Court. And everyone was celebrating in 1935. For those who don't know, Charles Hamilton Houston was the architect of Brown v. Board. He was really the mastermind that created the mentees and the strategy that would lead to overturning Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896. He said to the crowds that were celebrating his work around winning that case, he said, the real battle is not in the courts. And I would argue the real battle is not in Congress, it's not in City Hall, The real battle is in the hearts and minds of people. That's where the real hard work starts. That's where you gotta read Souls of Black Folk, you gotta read Isabel Wilkerson, you gotta read The Color of Law, you gotta read, you gotta study, so that when you show up in the classroom, at your job, in that conversation with your auntie Nim or your cousin or your colleagues, that you show up prepared to do battle with ignorance. That's the real civil rights work. And right now, I feel like most people aren't prepared to do that. Most people don't even know American history. So I'd say this work of civil rights, when I say you see dead people, it is overwhelming for me to sit at the head of that table and see the flood of disparities, inequities, voting barriers to people having their right to exercise that franchise. There are so many issues that the average American doesn't even see. It's below the waterline. But I'm forced to see dead people. And what I tell people is I need you to see dead people. I need you to start paying attention to police violence. I need you to start paying attention to the work that Congresswoman Pressley is doing around so many issues around girls and women and around finances, economic development. Many of these issues are complex, but we gotta turn back on the TV, y'all. Because so many people tell me, I turned off my TV because I can't take all this Trump stuff. It's overwhelming me. The problem is you gotta turn it back on. Because if you don't turn it back on, you don't know what you're losing. We are literally turning back the clock on all that we fought for in 1964, 65, all that progress and effort and people died for our rights and our opportunity, we're losing it. That's not an overstatement. So I say this to just say to Ayanna's teeing up this question, this statement from me, people know me, I can sit here and just dump a whole bunch of history on you that most of you have never heard before, right? I literally love to do it. I'd love to do it. I'm gonna say one, Crispus Attucks. How many people know the Crispus Attucks story? Probably you don't. First of those killed, American Revolution, supposedly, the beef was not really about British rule, it was about jobs. It was about the British soldiers taking the jobs of the colonists during that time. Many people might not know that John Adams was the attorney defending the British soldiers in that case. He would become President Adams. Many people might not know that his arguments in court were racist arguments. You go to most law firms, they celebrate John Adams to this day. But John Adams would argue in that time period that Crispus Attucks' size, he was 6'2", the average height of men was 5'6", 5'8", justified his killing because he was black. Then I take you to Michael Brown and Tamir Rice and Laquan McDonald and so many others. That's why I tell the history story. It repeats itself, and we don't know it. So history, to me, when I sit around that table, I'm constantly dealing with these policy issues, and I'm inserting history in every conversation.
Thank you. So how I'm showing up and doing the work is in a couple of ways. So I'm a proud member of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, and so we are very heavily focused on education and youth. And so one of the greatest programs that I do or help facilitate is our youth symposium, which is every March of every year, and we focus on going into communities and making sure that there are children getting access to additional education. So I'm also a member of the Brockton area NAACP, and so we really focus on working with the youth. And so I think one of the ways that I show up is preparing the future leaders. Like Dr. Curry shared earlier, we are not passing down the knowledge for the next leader, and we're going to eventually die out with no one there to take our place. And I refuse to let all of that knowledge die off with us. Another way that I show up in this work, and I can't take full credit, I do want to shout out Jen Muroff, who's here today. She works with me with the League of Women Voters, and we support bills that defend democracy. And like Dr. Curry also shared, we're turning back the time. And so some of the bills that we are focusing on and we're supporting and giving testimonies are just a few that I want to name, is promoting human treatment and rehabilitation when people are being released from incarceration. We also working on post-election audits and making sure that people's voices are heard and actually accounted for. And then the last thing that I want to kind of highlight is that we promote racially inclusive curriculum in the schools, and that's a really big thing, especially even more so now that we are being erased from textbooks. I remember just a few years ago, my brother called me, and he told me that he read an article where they had rephrased slavery as involuntary servitude. And I couldn't believe that. I said, what? Slavery? That's what it means, right? And so with everything coming down in Philadelphia, like the monuments and the plaques that talk about our history, that we have to keep fighting for. And we're going to keep making sure that we do that and making sure that our history is not erased, because once we lose that history, we are bound to repeat it, and we are repeating it. And so that's how I show up in the work, and that's what I want to continue to do. But also making and working with Black and brown people that are running for office. Like, that is my huge passion, is campaign management and working with candidates, but working with them early so that they are deeply rooted in the community and know the people that they're working with, not just popping up out of nowhere and saying, I want to run. I know we had this conversation just last Friday where we start molding them and start preparing them for their time. And so I think all of that is all tying together to make sure that we are doing what we need to do to protect civil rights.
Say the question again.
No worries. Thinking about now, modern day, what does protecting and fighting for civil rights look like in your daily work?
Since you've invited me here, you've invited me here to be me.
Correct.
And since this is Black History Month, I just want to take a moment while I acknowledge my commitment to do the work of safety and liberation of all marginalized people. I just want to talk about Black folks for a moment. Because in this moment, what I see my responsibility, I revisit the words of Anna Julia Cooper often, who said, when and where I enter, the entire race enters, human race, with me. As a Black woman, we have been the liberators, the patriots, the defenders of democracy, the truth tellers, the justice seekers, the table shakers, the movement builders. I was sharing with someone earlier today they were asking me, can you expound upon what you mean when you say anti-Blackness with this administration is on steroids? I have too many examples to enumerate. I think the problem is that we actually don't name anti-Blackness. It is conflated with racism. And so when you have a white supremacist, a chief of white supremacy, an occupant in the Oval Office, emboldening white supremacy, and we can talk about the ways in which he is xenophobic and anti-woman and anti-LGBTQ and trans. Very few people will name anti-Black, but pay attention. Pay attention, because we are confronted daily with a layered, unrelenting, legislated assault on Black people, on Black bodies, on Black votes, on Black power, on Black history, on Black progress. And we have to name it, because what's happened is that the codified harm to Black folk in budgets, the legislated harm to Black folks is so systemic, so unrelenting, that it is unremarkable to people. But Black women are still dying of sepsis in parking lots because someone doesn't believe their pain or the laws won't allow them to treat them and to intervene. Black men are still being strung up from trees. Black voters are still being denied access to the ballot. Black men still have the shortest life expectancy. Black home ownership is still the lowest that it's been in 6 decades. So in this moment, I feel a tremendous responsibility, 1, to be a truth teller, 2, to make sure that these harms are not normalized. We have extended a cultural grace to the occupant of the Oval Office by saying, that's just him being him. That's just more bluster. Of course he's hateful and harmful. That's what he does. But your silence is not going to save you. It is not going to save any of us. We have to resist, reject, condemn. And policy is my love language, because every harm done to Black folk and marginalized people was legislated.
It wasn't something that just like happened in the ether. So I remain focused on how to undo centuries of harm, how to mitigate active harm in this moment, while still advancing an affirmative vision. And I'll close on this. I talk often about how in that speech that Dr. King gave at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, that was not the speech that he was supposed to give, that while he could have continued to sit in the inequities and disparities and injustices, he gave voice to a dream. And in a fascist state, they don't want you to dream. Dreams are not hokey. The dream of the slave is what kept them alive, freedom. So in order to do radical work, we must first have a radical dream. And so while I'm doing the active work of mitigating harm, I still am seeking to advance an affirmative vision. So when I reintroduced reparations, people said, why would you do that? You don't even have all the Dems supporting that. You don't have a majority in the House, the Senate, the White House. This is, you know what we're living in. Why would you do that? I said, because it's a moment of anti-Blackness on steroids, and so I'm going to be unapologetically pro-Black. That's why I'm doing it. So we still have to do the affirmative work. And I'll get into some policies and stuff later, but that's what I see as my role in this moment, is to not allow the suffering of Black folks to be so normalized that it is no longer called out, to be confronted, and that we enlist everyone actively as co-conspirators in the work of our safety and our freedom, because we have liberated everyone else. You know, our movement is the blueprint that everyone else seeks to replicate. So.
My follow-up question to that, this question is for all of you all, especially when communities feel unheard and harmed. What does accountability look like for leaders today? They say, hey.
This was a question last night too, and it came up this morning even about Jesse Jackson. And I remember Lori Nelson, City of Boston, Lee Pelton, Boston Foundation, a group of us were on a call 8 o'clock this morning, sharing our own personal stories about Jesse and where we are. We're talking about a Black agenda on the call, probably about 15, 20 of us on the call, that we still need a Black agenda for Massachusetts, for Boston, to address all the issues that we've been talking about. And I made a comment on that call that you have to be crazy to be a civil rights leader. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You gotta be crazy to wanna be a congresswoman and a Black woman at that in the United States Congress. And when I see her, when I go down to visit, and I just took a delegation down, I missed her meeting, but my staff and health centers were there in her office, I always give her a hug, and I think to myself, this job is hard right now. Mm-hmm. Because I know when I get off the plane in DC, it doesn't feel the same. Yeah. When I have to walk through security at one of those buildings, congressional offices, I don't feel safe like I used to. I don't feel the joy of walking into those buildings. For civil rights leaders, for Black activists, this has never been easy. Never been easy. Talking about white supremacy would have gotten you kicked out of school. Right? I'm not talking about my parents' generation. When I was in college, it was controversial to talk about white supremacy. And now it's brazen in prime time when you turn on your television, right? What President Trump did with the images of Michelle and Barack was outright racism. Outright racism. And yet, as a Black person, I tell people, if you want to do this work, because I argue, and I say this about all three of us and many of my colleagues who do this work, we could easily step away from this volunteerism or this activism and make a shitload of money somewhere else. Because people don't know we're up at 3 o'clock at night researching and writing papers and interviewing with the media and preparing for an interview. They don't know the work that requires. Mm-hmm. You do this because you love your people. Yeah. There's absolutely, even if we don't always agree. I was with Siddiqui Campbell last night. We may not even always agree on the strategy, on the perspective, on the ideological differences. But one thing I can say about all of the folks that I get to work with, they absolutely love their people. They're modern day Ida B. Wellses. They're modern day Diane Nashes. And you don't know them. You don't know many of them because they don't get the media. Because quite frankly, they're constantly getting a barrage of criticism. You know, I always tell people, when I do write this book that I hope will finish before the end of the year, it'll focus on not the stuff that you typically read about black leaders, but the slings and arrows that they received, right? People know Dr. King and Letters from a Birmingham Jail, but every black leader got those stories, where people call into question your intentions, where people are saying that you're too revolutionary, or you're not revolutionary enough, or they're mischaracterizing your position. You get that all the time. When I was president of NAACP, I literally wanted to walk away, I wanted to walk away from being NAACP president for years. And half, 70% of the stress of that job was your own people. I'm gonna say it again. 70% of that job and the stress was your own people, because there was so much reliance. I'll say this last thing. NAACP is an example, as a co-host. There is no other civil rights organization in the history of this country like NAACP. And I respect all of them. Your child gets murdered by the police, you call an NAACP. You're a police officer and you don't get a promotion, or you get ousted from the police department, you call an NAACP. You go to the hospital and you get disparate treatment, unequal treatment, 2002 report confirmed that they actually don't treat us the same, you call an NAACP. You get stopped by the police and it was an unlawful stop, you call an NAACP. I literally was overwhelmed with calls. I couldn't go sit at a football game without getting at least 3 or 4 complaints while I was sitting there watching my son's football game. You gotta be crazy to do this. But you gotta love your people. And I remember when I studied that history, that they endured so much more than we do now. So I think the reality is, in your question, this work is hard, and it's the work that we were called to do. And we need more people to agree and commit to doing this work too. I'll be honest with you, sometimes I get tired of people who got comments. They want to write about it. They want to be on social media with opinion. I know everybody got an opinion. But if you ain't marching, if you ain't voting, if you ain't showing up, then I actually got a little patience for you. Because it's easy to have an opinion, but it's real hard to lead. It's real hard to show up. Because in fact, you might get fired. Raise your hand in the meeting and say, well, you know what, that's discriminatory. That data is flawed. It doesn't include black and brown folks. That was a killing of an African American. And why do we now, no disrespect to Miss Good, but people don't mention DJ Henry. Right. And the police officer jumped on a car in Pace University when he was a student and killed him the same way they did that white woman in Minnesota, but many of you probably don't even know his name. How dare we not value his life? This work is hard.
Mercy. I feel like you've covered everything. You spoke to my soul. I was having flashbacks. No, it's very hard to have the job that we have and being the leaders in the community. I think really there's not much to add to that, but the only thing I guess I'll just kind of sprinkle on top of what you've shared is that sometimes you have to have those honest conversations. When we talk about accountability, sometimes people have been in their positions for so long that they lose touch with the community and they kind of lose their way. And so I think as a leader and as someone who's being led, we have to have those conversations about telling someone, hey, let's reset. And it's okay to reset. Nothing's wrong with that, because we do get so deep into it and we do go crazy where we have to recenter ourselves and remember why we went in to do the work that we're doing. And so I think to keep our leaders accountable and to keep ourselves accountable is to take moments of stillness and to reset. I know in my sorority, when we get a little too heated in our chapter meetings, which we do, we are a large group of women, and when we get upset with one another, we step back and we read our pledge, and we lean on the shield, and that's what reminds us to go back and do the work that we're supposed to do and not let that stigma hurt, stay with us, because that hurt gets in the way of the progress that we're trying to make. And one thing, when you were talking, I was thinking of my dad. He always tells me this: we don't have to like one another, but we show up when it matters. And so that always sticks to me. And the NAACP sometimes get on my nerves. They do. The emails that I get late at night from the president and some of the other board members, I have to think about showing up when it matters. Yeah, I don't like the tone of the email, but I know that we all have the same mission. We're all trying to do the same thing. We might have different ways about going about it, but when I know that we all mean well in our hearts, I'm going to keep showing up. And I'm going to keep doing the work. And we'll get it past whatever feelings we have. We'll get past it. I know because we always do. So I think that's how we keep accountability within our leaders and within ourselves.
First, I just want to say that I don't define Black leadership exclusively by people that have a comma and a title after their name. As Michael was referencing, there are many leaders that are nameless and faceless to you, and that's why I think people forget when we say the civil rights movement, we mean the civil rights movement. So if you believe like I do, that this is not about how to just endure the next 3 years, but how to write the next 100, you tell me if you care enough to not just leave that work to 212 Democratic members of a caucus in Congress, or only to 8 civil rights organizations, or only to state reps and senators in a blue legislature. You're here right now because somebody already wrote the blueprint for your survival. So what is your responsibility to be a better ancestor than descendant? To write the blueprint for someone else's survival. And so, when I first ran for office, I used to, in a very well-meaning, a youthful, righteous way, say, I wanted to be a voice for the voiceless. But I know better than that. No one is voiceless. But they are unheard. And I think it's my job to create space for your voice to be heard, not for me to be your voice.
Correct.
And I also believe that we have to do this work collaboratively and cooperatively. And in a co-op, each person is bringing their gift, whatever that is. And each person needs to bring it to the resistance. When it comes to accountability, I'll be honest, I'm struggling because I think we have lost the nuance, the respect, and the art form of a call in. Everyone is operating from a place of a call out. And they are just posting things and moving on. And none of us are beyond reproach or inoculated from criticism, but oftentimes, because people are lacking in curiosity, I'm a lawmaker. You can't hold me accountable to the reach of an executive. I'm a lawmaker. So hold me accountable to what are the resources that I've delivered, what are the bills that I've moved or I've authored, what has been my visibility. I think people just see us in government. They think every position is the same. Most people don't actually even know what our jobs are. And that is okay because each of us have always done more than whatever our job defined. Because this is not a job, this is our work. So I don't have a problem with criticism. I think we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable because growth comes from discomfort. It comes from courageous conversations. But we do culturally need to be operating from a place of a thoughtful call in so we can be strategic in our litigation, our legislation, our agitation, our mobilization, and our organization. Because that's what we need to do right now. The Congressional Black Caucus lives by the ethos, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. So to your point, we don't have to agree on everything, right? Some people will probably say accountability looks like how you vote. It's all those things. It's how you stored your finances. It's how you vote. It's how and when you speak up. Yeah. But it's not just about what you are calling us to do. It is about where we are compelled and obligated to do as a collective in this moment. I seek to govern in a way that is cooperative. So there's a collective responsibility.
I want to add something just really quickly to Ayanna's point. There are some badass leaders, though, and I don't mean good. I get to train, as Jillian knows, maybe 5 years ago, me, the DC NAACP president, the Dallas president, started a leadership program to train the next generation of leaders. We've had 500 graduates. They get trained for a year. They got to understand mobilization, our history, activism, how to read policy, how to write policy. And they literally go through this rigorous course for a year, and then they graduate. I say that to say this. I say to them all the time, if you go back to your cities and towns, you will see a lot of bad NAACP leaders. Bad ones. They give out scholarships. They do press conferences on soft things, but they never challenge authority. Because they don't like conflict, because they don't understand the issue, and they literally just take the job to do the bare minimum of the job. And there's many leaders like that, not just NAACP, leaders in general, but within our communities. There's a lot of weight on our leaders to show up, be present, and challenge authority. It irritates me. So when we did that training for that next generation, I called them on that. Which one are you when you go back? Do you get invited to the governor's ball, to the mayor's event, you get the awards, the plaques, the citations, and then you think you did a good job, but you didn't get body cameras. But you didn't change the use of force policy. But you didn't change our quality education system. And we needed to, as I say this to us in the room, we got to hold ourselves accountable. I actually got criticized a lot when I was president, but you know what I said to myself? I said, God works in mysterious ways. The criticism is either meant to do two things. Make me move my position because I'm not doing enough. And maybe I thought I was, but I can do more. Even if it was unfair, even if it was mean-spirited from the wrong person. Or it solidified that I actually feel good that I'm doing the right thing. So there's some benefit to criticism, even if it comes from the wrong person in the wrong way. And I think we absolutely, even with the NAACP, and I say this to my NAACP family, we got to have a higher bar because we waste time when we do that. Governors and mayors love us when we don't ask them questions. We're not doing report cards, grading them on what they're doing in housing, education, healthcare. Governors love us. They love to ask us to come to meetings as long as you ain't calling them out.
Ooh, wee. Sometimes you don't even have the words to communicate after they speak.
But I just want to say, like, my issue though is that I don't need to go to Facebook and when I can pick up the phone and call my brother. I just don't want us doing the work of white supremacy. That's my issue. We can hold each other accountable, but let's have a family conversation. How many of us did not know for decades about A. Philip Randolph and Dr. King and Bayard Rustin, and we didn't know? That's not because there was not conflict and there were not tensions, but they were not litigating these things publicly.
That was good. No. Because you know you have so many more questions you want to ask, and you're like, I got to be respectful of the time.
And I know, they send their notes and everything. We feel all the energy. They're like, okay, we only got 10.
I think the beauty to what you guys are talking about for criticism, though, is there's a lot of criticism in the movements, right? And a lot of these movements did begin in rooms like churches and classrooms and barbershops, and even in this room we're in today. There's a lot of people in the next generation in this room. Where do you believe the next wave of change will actually come from, and what is required to sustain it?
Go ahead, Courtney.
You know it was. I love it.
Really now you
And
can
I
be
thought-
Socratic with it.
I took a lot of time thinking about this question too, because I said, where is it? I think it takes place in a couple of places. I grew up in the church. Dad's a deacon, and so I spent every Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday in church. And so as someone who still goes, I do still believe that these conversations are happening in the church. So I don't think that has ever changed. I do think, though, that we have expanded significantly into social media, where there are online chats that are being had about the change that we want to see. I think a lot of it is on podcasts. I think these conversations, we live in a day now where podcasts are everywhere. There's 1,000 that you could go and find on YouTube. And I think that's where the conversations are being had. I know I really, he's very militant, but I love listening to him. But Philip Scott is one of my favorite YouTubers. And so I look at the comments and I see people having conversations with one another about something that he said or something that they disagreed with. And so while, mind you, we might be living in separate states, but we're having these conversations digitally. And we would never imagine that these are the way that we're having these conversations. Now, how it mobilizes, I'm not quite sure. I still sit and think about it even today of how do we take these conversations and then turn them into action. One of the things that the league knows I really, really dislike is that we constantly have conversations in our board meetings, but then there's no action. Like we close the Zoom and then we go back to whatever we were doing and then that was it. There was no work that's being had between each board meeting. And I always tell my board members, as the co-president, as the person that leads this organization, is that we should not only be talking about the matters that we're addressing in board meetings, the 2 hours that we're together. We should be doing the work and having updates at the meeting, not discussing them. And so I guess to go back to really the question, I think it happens across the board. It's still happening in the barbershop. I still think it's happening in the churches. It's happening in classrooms. I know for me, as an adjunct professor teaching American government, I was supposed to teach tonight, but I know my students are happy that I canceled. I know they are. I know that they ask me questions. They say, Professor Henderson, why is this happening? I thought we had checks and balances. I thought the Constitution said this. And I'm baffled every time to answer their questions because they're absolutely right. This is not what was written in the Constitution. This is not how government is supposed to act. And so but when they ask these questions, I know that their wheels are turning. They're critically thinking, they're processing things, and it doesn't make sense to them, and it doesn't make sense to me either. So I think they're happening still as they have before. I just think how we mobilize is going to look different. And I'm going to pause and think on that and let the other two join in so I can see how we translate that into actionable items.
My son, I have 3 sons. One went to St. John's and graduated, has a good job now. The middle son is at Norfolk State in his senior year. My youngest son is a senior at their academy. As any parent in here who's had a child go to college, they start putting the applications in, you start stressing about whether you advocated for them enough, whether you need to call somebody, whether they'll get the acceptance letters. And I was stressing about a month ago. I was really worried because the school he goes to, and I make a lot of money, and I don't say that in bragging, because I'm from the projects. So the fact that I make the money I have now is literally a blessing from God that I make that money. And I pay a lot of money for him to go to school. And I paid a lot of money for him to go to school at an independent school so he could get to Tufts and Harvard. And what I found was that these independent schools, many of them, not all of them, is that they still discriminate against our kids. And that many of the kids, and I said to myself, my son's in no AP honors courses, but he's an AB student. Boy, black boy. Now I can tell you, I was in all honors and AP courses. I never asked to be in not nan one of them. And I said it that way, not nan one of them. A teacher said, Michael, I see potential in you. I'm putting you in AP English. I see potential in you. I'm putting you in that class. White and black teachers and others saw potential in me and told me I was going to be in an honors class. He was in none in his junior year. But I'm so busy doing civil rights work and out here serving health equity and racial justice, I wasn't necessarily paying attention to his classwork. So stressing over it, he decided he wanted to go to Morehouse. So, and Morehouse is competitive to get into because many boys want to go to Morehouse, especially now. There's a swarm on HBCUs right now, by the way. A lot more of our kids want to go to HBCUs. So, they want to go there too. So my son applies, and I'm stressing because he initially got a rejection letter. And I called Shagun, I called Matthew Borders, Bishop Borders' son. I called every Morehouse person I knew and said, my son's trying to get in Morehouse. Here's why I tell you the story. He wrote an essay because he worked at the Old North Church for the summer. So that means he walked around the Old North Church, walked people, maybe some of you even went by, didn't know it was my son, and he gave you the history of Paul Revere, one if by land, two if by sea, the history of the church, right? That 1775, 1776, we're about to celebrate 250 years of independence. And he said to me, when he wrote his essay, he said, Dad, you always talk about quantum leap. It's a presentation I do where I jump through history and go back and forth. He said, and I dawned on me when I wrote my essay, that if I was there when Paul Revere made his ride, I would have been a slave. So I'm really celebrating this moment of resisting British rule. Patrick Henry, Patrick Henry's comment in 1775, give me liberty or give me death. And yet at the same time, I would have been, I think, one of 1,500 slaves in Boston at that time. And he wrote his essay on that. And his guidance counselor told him, I don't think you should do that because colleges won't let you in. Now that was a masterful, I'm a writer, masterfully written essay he wrote. But he had to worry about telling the truth because he wouldn't get into a school. I tell you that, he got into Morehouse 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And the burden that I had when I was raising my kids, because I got all that history on college campuses, right? When you get the history for any students, you get mad first because you got duped. You got duped because you've been popping off fireworks for 1776, and then you realize that we weren't free in 1776. So is the real Independence Day 1776, or is it 1863 with the Emancipation Proclamation? Is it 1865 with Juneteenth? Is it 1964 with the Civil Rights Act? Is it 1965 with what's the real Independence Day? Because you just gaslighted me to be celebrating a holiday that you knew it wasn't right, it wasn't ethical, it wasn't godly to enslave us. But yet you got me going to Robert E. Lee High School. Right. You got me serving on Robert E. Lee bases in the military or Confederate bases. Right. You got me, this is one, you can look it up if you don't trust me. You got me running out to an ice cream truck that has a tune that the lyrics to that tune says, nigga want a watermelon, ha ha ha, nigga want a watermelon, ha ha ha. Don't believe me, look it up. That's the masterful gaslighting of this country. So I say to you, I didn't want to impart all of that on my son, because when I got in college, I didn't rock the same way as on the campus. Teachers didn't want me in their class after that. I started challenging the administration about admissions. I started not rocking with some of my white friends who didn't want to hear. They wanted the docile, accepting Michael. They didn't want the Michael calling out racism. I didn't want to give that to my son. I need you to hear me. I didn't want to give that to my son because I wanted him to go to school and not be burdened with that. That's why the question about why this generation may not be as aware, because there's a generation of us who said, I don't want to tell them all of that. I just want them to go to school, have friends, succeed. Now they're waking up. Now I see it when I teach young people, when I go into classes at New England Law or Suffolk University, they're coming in angry, frustrated, ready to protest, climb, and take flags off, tear down J. Marion Sims' monument. This is the generation we're in now. They're ready to now activate and do something about it. I feel really encouraged by that.
I mean this sincerely. It is just what a privilege to be alive at the same time and proximate to the two of you. Thank you both for those answers. Can you hear me? I was just offering some effusive verbal bouquets. Okay. And while we're talking about HBCUs, I do want to say that my daughter will be a baby bison at HU in the fall, majoring in political science, so she has said her whole life she can't stand politics and would never do it. And so here we are. Thinking about history, I want to say one of the challenges I think we have, and that we need to do better in imparting this wisdom and counsel to young people, because every movement, every progress that's been ushered in was thanks to the intellectual capital and the sweat equity of young people, and I think that will continue to be true. But we have to teach them not only the work of resistance, and we also have to talk to them about how long progress has taken, because I think they think of the Montgomery bus boycott or examples as that is in a snapshot. And if we're not, that's why we have to do the work of deconstructing. So Michael, when there has been a successful campaign that you have initiated either in youth development or boycott, or we have to provide the anatomy of organizing. Even right now, when we'll say, everyone needs to organize or call your elected, there's a presumption that everyone knows. And I think it leads to sort of a microwave activism, where if I just post something, that is sufficient. If and I understand it's hard because in a strategy to flood the zone by this hostile administration, by this fascist, by this white supremacist, you are exhausted. You are in the overwhelm. And everything feels so enormous in scale that you wonder what real impact can you have. And so you walk away. And that's what they want, is for you to believe that this view they have of our country as dark and divided and dystopian and of a dictatorship, that it is an inevitability. And that's why it is so important that we tell our history, but that we tell an accurate history that is not romanticized, but is revealing and educational about the real work of organizing. Because the work of, the tool of boycott and the sophisticated organizing that had to take place for 300 plus days, that plan, I mean, no cell phones, no, right? So I always go back to that riff in my mind. They had more to do and less resource. More to do and less resource. So they protested and they resisted, but they had to organize in order to advance legislation to actually advance progress. So there were steps to this. So I think we have to be, sometimes you said it's hard work, but we can make it look easy. We're not showing you all the steps. You wrote a brilliant speech, but how many drafts were there? You know, what was the syllabus? What was your resources, you know, to generate that? What do we say in the church? They know my glory, but they don't know my story. We have to do a better job at telling the story. And I think that some of that, you know, is happening if you think about the Target boycott and then things like that. But I definitely think that organizing is happening with our young people. And they'll usher us into, you know, but it also is important that we are holding space for our elders and extracting that wisdom and actively listening and then applying those lessons learned. You know, succession planning, passing the baton, the next generation of leaders is not just something that's organic. You know, we should be intentional in their development. And so that's why I thank you, both of you, for being so intentional in that work.
I know my last question was supposed to be my last question, but I got one more, and then we're going to wrap up. I'm throwing an audible with this one, because it came to me as I was standing up here. But I want you all to leave a piece of advice, a phrase, a word, or a resource that you want them to walk away with.
Okay, I'll start. And it's honest because it is a quote and an affirmation that I say every day, that I derive a strength, inspiration, and instruction from. I'm an Aquarius, so I love a good affirmation. Shout out to all the Aquariuses. So it's an affirmation that was gifted to me by one of my movement siblings, the brilliant Brittany Packnett Cunningham. And it was an affirmation she gifted to me during COVID, and I've said it every day since then. And it is that I choose the discipline of hope over the ease of cynicism, and I choose fortitude over fatalism. I choose the discipline of hope over the ease of cynicism. And I choose fortitude over fatalism. I say that every day. It reminds me that hope is a discipline. It is a practice. And then Coretta Scott King, who is a huge inspiration in my life, and we share the same birthday, said that freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. And I was sharing with Crystal the other day that people hear that quote, and I think some people are defeated by it. Like, well, what do you mean? Why should I be inspired by that? Gains don't exist in perpetuity? I'm not defeated by that. What it does for me is crystallize my responsibility in this moment, in this generation. We know gains don't exist in perpetuity. You need to only look at the Supreme Court and their recent rulings as evidence of that. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. So that is our charge. That is our responsibility in this moment. I can't judge myself according to 400 years of oppression and centuries of harm. I can only hold myself accountable for what I have done in my time here, in this moment, for this generation.
Oh, wow. So there's a couple of things that I could leave you all with. I know one of the things that I always repeat to myself is good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better is best. And I think that can be applied to, it's not mine, I promise. But I repeat that to myself because I think until we be the best versions of ourselves, we are no good to the community. But I also know that sometimes you need rest. And so if you're constantly pouring into other people's cups, you're gonna leave yourself with an empty cup. And so that's why Sundays are always my day where I have no phone, no email, I don't do anything. I literally turn into my couch. So I would leave that for the people that are doing the work and mobilizing and organizing and teaching and doing all that. Make sure you take time to rest because you cannot be good to anyone if you're not good to yourself. And then just perfecting your talents because the world needs it, whether it be your art, your voice, being a planner. We need all of that because all fronts need fighters. We can't all be, the MLKs and the Malcolm X's, but we can all be part of the fight because we all have a part in it, and it might look a little different. So just lend your talents and perfect those talents.
That's right.
And I would want to leave a somber note, but I'm going to mention something that's probably going to be a surprise to Congresswoman Pressley. Sunday, I got a call from Darrell Fox, Gloria Fox's son, that his son committed suicide. Now, any of you who don't know, Sincere Allah is his name. But when I knew him, he was a 17-year-old. And we had just come back from the Million Man March, and a group of us were activists, and we were organizing, trying to deal with all these issues we talked about tonight in 1995. And this 17-year-old kid who was a peer educator, a HIV/AIDS expert, recovery coach, like he did all this stuff when he was 17, and he hung out with us. And he was going through the back and forth between his mom and his dad, Darrell, and his mom was in Virginia, and he went to stay with his friends in Virginia. And a few months later, I got a call from Darrell, his dad, saying, Darnell's been arrested for murder, and we know he didn't do it, and he's facing the death penalty. Darnell was in jail, I want to say over 25 years, and got out. Governor Northrup commuted his sentence right before he left office in Virginia. So he didn't get the death penalty, he got life, and they commuted his sentence, and everyone in Virginia knew that Darnell did not do this murder. He did a crime, but he didn't do the murder. And, but because he wouldn't say who did the murder, he got life. So for years, all of these innocence projects, other organizations were trying to get him out, and he finally got out. And I teach a law school class. My first year teaching the class, he had just gotten out that week, and he came and spoke virtually, because he can't come back to Massachusetts, by the way. State laws, and I was just talking to Senator Liz Miranda about this, and I don't understand all the nuance of it, but he can't come back because he was convicted of a crime in another state. So he couldn't even come back to his home city, his home state, with his grandmother, who eventually passed away, Representative Gloria Fox. He couldn't come home. And I think he got a temporary pass to come home when she passed. I tell you this story to say this, that it broke my heart to know that he committed suicide and the trauma he experienced with being over 2 decades in prison, and connect that back to mass incarceration. All these black men and women who were put away for mostly nonviolent crimes, and then spent a lifetime in prison, and then we turn them back on the streets with no job, trying to reconnect with their families with emotional trauma. And his brother, who was brilliant, he had become an activist. Literally, if you Google Sincere Allah, he was now the spokesperson for child life imprisonment cases, because he was a great example. He didn't deserve to get a life sentence. And he was traveling all across Virginia and virtually to talk about this issue. And he took his life. And then on a call this morning with a whole bunch of black men and women, we were talking, and I mentioned that he had committed suicide. And 3 other people told the story of someone who just committed suicide this week. Wow. On one phone call. I always say, black don't crack. How many people heard that? That's bullshit. Black cracks on the inside. Right? That's chronic unemployment, that's suicide, that's my sister who was addicted to crack most of my childhood. Black does crack. There's no way you can endure what we've gone through and not crack. I think we all have a responsibility to figure out what your role is. I know you want to make money. I know you want to get a great education. I know you want to raise your children. I know you got all these great things you want to do in your life, but you are put here for a purpose. And that purpose is to help others. So if it's women's issues, women's rights issues, if it's mass incarceration, if it's suicide, if it's the Medicaid cuts that are about to kill a whole bunch of people because they won't have access to health insurance, you got something to do. And we can't afford for not one of you in the room to say it's not my responsibility. Because there's a massive people buying into that bullshit right now. They should pull themselves up by the bootstraps. I just sat through friggin' RFK Jr. at a conference. At a conference for health centers, talking about how people need to eat better and take care of their health. Of course we do, but that ain't the reason we sick. So, I mean, anybody who knows unequal treatment will tell you that, part of the reason we sick is because you didn't treat us the same. Part of the reason we're sick is because you put us in neighborhoods that were environmentally unsafe. Part of the reason we're sick is because you exposed us to racism. And racism can impact your health. Read the book Weathering. The book Weathering, I'm going to end it on this. Weathering, Dr. Geronimus, 1990, was researching women's health, fertility, their childbearing, and their ability to give children. And she looked at it because in 1990, they believed that black women were having adverse outcomes in pregnancy because they were teens. Now, I was in 1990. I remember all the teen ads about teen pregnancy. When she did that research at University of Michigan, she proved that that wasn't true. The healthiest mothers and the babies were born to the teen mothers. And that as they enter 20, then and now, 20, 30, 40, they had bad outcomes in their pregnancy. She coined the phrase weathering. That sustained exposure to racism, poverty, trauma, name it, can impact your health. That's weathering. So I ask you the question as we think about what weathering is. She just wrote a book, read it. What are you weathered to? High rates of student dropouts of black and brown kids, being stopped by the police in neighborhoods, not getting in the AP honors classes that doesn't tee them up to go to the right elementary schools, to get in the right middle schools, to get in the right colleges that put you at Tufts. Because that's why we're not here in the numbers we should be, because we didn't go through the gauntlet of higher academic opportunities that position us to get to Harvard. And I always say there's a little black girl right now in Medford or Roxbury meant to find a cure for cancer. That if you actually believe that all of us are equally talented, like it lies in all of us, that little black girl is meant to save your life, but you'll never know her because she doesn't have the academic rigor, because she didn't have the STEM courses, because she had a teacher who didn't believe that she was smart enough. And therefore, 1 in 2 women in this room, look it up, will have cancer in their lifetimes. 1 in 3 men in this room will have cancer in their lifetimes. Cancer's getting younger. You need her to be that person she was meant to be to save your life.
Ladies and gentlemen, give another round of applause to our panelists.
And we'll also want to thank Catherine. And we also want to thank our interpreters. Yes.
Thank y'all for being here. Thank y'all for being in this room. I again want to thank the Department of Racial and Social Justice, the entire team, Amanda Najee Williams for the work that she put in, Adrian for setting everything up for today. We want to thank the NAACP Mystic Valley, Jilly from Philly, even though she's not from Philly, it's not real. Lydia, thank you guys so much for setting up and the countless conversations we were having leading up to this conversation. All of Tufts University, shout out to y'all for getting us this room, this space. Rocco and Aaron, thank you for answering all my calls, texts, and emails. Thank you for the Somerville TV for doing the live streaming for all the people at home. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation. To our interpreters in the room, we are so deeply grateful for you guys being present and supporting. And for y'all in the crowd, give a round of applause for yourselves. Now, as you leave here, we do have a few requests for y'all. One, please take food in the back. You don't have to leave anything here. Take it, okay? Two, please make sure you guys go check out the check-in tables to sign up and get hip, but get in alignment with the different activities, programmings, and activations that are happening with the Department of Racial and Social Justice, as well as the NAACP Mystic Valley. Also, when you guys open your programs on the second page, there's an evaluation. Please fill it out. If y'all are interested and enjoy conversations like this, we want to know so we can keep bringing them forward to you guys. And y'all do not have to go home, but you can't stay here. All right? So we thank you. Please get home safely. And again, thank you so much.